Hello everybody, Kirby Fan here for a quick little announcement video. Sorry everything on the channel has been a bit quiet as of recently, aside from some tier list videos. But that's what I'm here to tell you about today, why the channel has been slow, and the excitement that you can look forward to in August. That's right, Kirby Month is returning! So, this is a bit of an odd one, huh? Out of all the Kirby games I ranked for this, for sure, this one's the most unconventional. That's right, up next is Kirby Triple Deluxe. But no way this is the spot for it, right? Honestly, the first time I ranked these, I had it even lower. Nowadays, I obviously hold this game in a much higher regard. If I thought the last two games were great, obviously, I think Nightmare in Dreamland is great. He uses his tongue not to eat enemies like in Dreamland 3, but to lash them like the whip ability. I love that. It's so funny. And look at these two. They're so cute. And look over here at Marks. He's gonna steal my money while I'm not looking. And speaking of stealing money, he's back. The game is a gem. I absolutely love it. This is one of those games I'd play if I'm ever in a bad mood because its charm will just cheer me right up. And I can even play it with a friend because it's got really good co-op too. Most franchises have some pretty bad first games, but Kirby's not about that. Kirby's first game holds up outstandingly well and was really close to placing in the top 10. Yeah, hard to believe that we're almost at the top 10, huh? Funny enough, I have distinct memories of not being excited for this game. Off the heels of Epic Yarn, a game I love now and even liked back then, but wanting something more traditional, I didn't see any potential in this game. Sure enough, when it came out, I couldn't resist getting it on launch, and I was hooked from the very start. Even today in 2020, I think the fact that this game manages to run on NES hardware is not only impressive, but something that actually holds up. For example, the rotating buildings in Butter Building, that straight up should not have been possible. At the very least, the building spinning with enemies coming in and out depending on how quickly Kirby is running, or if he stops, all with minimal lag. On an NES, you can't convince me there wasn't wizardry involved. And that's it. I absolutely adore Superstar. I wanted to do something special to close out Kirby Month. So, for the final video, I'll be comparing all three of them, talking strengths, which one does what best, etc., in one video and finalizing the ranking there. Well, here we are. For those following along for Kirby Month, where I've made videos ranking and discussing every single Kirby game to date, this is it. The top 3 Kirby games, all of which I consider to be the greatest games ever made. I can't even begin to imagine the hours I've poured into these 3 games. I'd say something ironically like, "Oh, isn't that so sad?" But no, it's not sad. These games deserve more playtime. These 3 games are, by release date, just so I don't spoil anything for all you lovelies out there. No, not the flower. We killed that thing back at Superstar Stacker, okay? Are Superstar Ultra, Return to Dreamland, and Planet Robobot. Before we dive into these games and get into the nightmare of trying to actually rank them, let's quickly go over my first impressions, kind of my personal history, how things were when I first played all 3 of these, because oh boy, trust me when I say we have a lot to say, this is a good starting point. Beginning with Ultra, I was just getting into high school when this game came out. I was a much different person back then, and while I'd rather not go into any specifics, I was in a much worse place than I am right now. Kirby was one of the few things that I held on to keep me in good spirits, and when I found out that Superstar, a game I genuinely loved but I could never play because I didn't own a Super Nintendo at the time, was getting a DS remake, I had to have it. I got it, spent the entire day playing it, and immediately I fell in love. Planet Robobot was pretty straightforward as well. As you all know, I'm not the biggest Triple Deluxe fan, but around this time, I liked it enough, a bit more than I do now. So when I saw Planet Robobot looked almost identical on the surface, I wasn't thrilled. Not to mention, I was in college at this point, and I couldn't skip class because I had a calculus test that day. And if you've taken calc classes before, you know how awful that is. But I played the game, and I liked it. But then, I kept playing it, and playing, and playing, and playing. I couldn't stop, and every time I played it, I found more things about it that I just adored. Going back to Triple Deluxe afterwards, and then playing Planet Robobot again, I knew the game was actually something incredible. All simple, right? Easy to understand? Because I can't even put into words how different it was for Return to Dreamland. This game was announced in 2004. I know most people cling to that 2005 trailer, but the initial announcement was all I needed to freak out. Little did I know that Kirby would go through an insane drought, and we wouldn't even get a traditional Kirby game, barring Squeak Squad, until 2011. For the record, I do think Kirby GCN and Return to Dreamland, Star Allies 2 actually, are all vastly different games, so I'm not trying to call this game the actual Kirby GCN. Literally all I'm saying is that it was something. In 2011, I was still in high school, and I was a good student. I got good grades, I got along with my teachers, I never skipped class. I played my DS during school hours, but otherwise, I was a model student. So when Return to Dreamland came out, I didn't skip class, and it was painful. It was definitely one of the worst ideas I ever had as a student. I waited so long for this game to come out, and when I finally got home and put the beautiful Return to Dreamland disc in the Wii, I just couldn't contain my excitement. But other than the occasional bathroom break and a literal 5-minute dinner, I actually hurt my throat from eating too quickly that day, believe it or not. I did nothing but play Return to Dreamland for the whole day. And ignoring school and reasonably paced meals, Return to Dreamland is basically all I did for a long time. Now, with that out of the way, we can actually talk about the games themselves. And what better place to start with than, well, the start. The first level in all three of these games are excellent. We'll start with Return to Dreamland this time. It's a simple first level that not only reintroduces Kirby in the traditional style we all know and love to a console for the first time in 11 years, why? But also highlights the game's new features in a very simple but effective manner, making for great first impressions. For starters, co-op. Kirby and up to 3 other friends can run around and cause mayhem at once. I'm typically not a fan of multiplayer in games like this. I prefer going solo to get a much more personal experience out of it, but Return to Dreamland's multiplayer is a lot of fun. The levels are designed in a way so that the more people you're playing with, the more fun it is, running around and just causing destruction with the Kirby crew. While I'm not sure if this was intentional, the levels were designed with single player in mind first. This is the result, a really enjoyable experience. Items are also introduced in this level. To advance, Kirby needs to carry a key to this door so that he can unlock it. The two things you'll notice immediately while carrying this key are that Kirby can't float and he can't attack. Most items are on the offensive side anyway, but they don't offer the freedom that the standard copy ability does, considering, you know, you can float with those, here you can only jump. Using items isn't as straightforward as one might expect because of this, and they're actually among my favorite things about Return to Dreamland because of this fact. You also encounter this very large Waddle Dee, which, spoilers, it's just 3 Waddle Dees carrying this large Waddle shield. I don't know what it actually is called, so I'm just calling it the Waddle Dee shield. Head cannon, turn cannon. Anyway, to inhale this, you're required to use the Super Inhale, a mechanic that allows Kirby to inhale either large objects, a ton of enemies, or both, on top of everything else the normal Inhale could already do. The Super Inhale helps with these auto-scrolling segments in another dimension, optional areas that Kirby can go to after getting to a certain point, with another new mechanic introduced in this game, the Super Abilities. I'm going to hold off on the Super Abilities for now, but they are introduced rather well in the first level, and the other dimension segments are also stellar. I really like how early in the level you're demonstrated the Super Inhale in a safe environment. Now that you're in another dimension, it's time to put your skills to the test with this thing. Get to work. What's incredible about this entire level is that it introduces so much new to the Kirby formula, but it still looks out for those new to the franchise by making challenges that require you to use the things Kirby's already been doing for years. Jumping, floating, regular inhaling, copy abilities, the works. And there aren't any forced text tutorials, you know, nothing that breaks the pace. Return to Dreamland introduced these signs in the back that pop up with visual instructions on what certain buttons do, and a check mark to tell you that, hey, look, you did it. If you ignore them, whatever. Doing what they say isn't required. If you're going to help a new player out with instructions, this is exactly how you should do it. So how does Planet Robobot handle its first level? Well, right off the bat, before getting into anything gameplay related, the game does an incredible job of showing you that Dreamland is, or has already been, heavily mechanized. Patches of grass are covered in metal, Waddle Dees are wearing construction helmets or piloting these cute little mini mechas, and even the camera angles are far more dynamic than they have been recently, harkening back to a game like Kirby 64. You can see top to bottom, left to right, diagonally, wherever, Dreamland is in trouble. Visually, Planet Robobot also excels with its backgrounds. A lot of thought and creativity went into how these were going to be made. Skipping ahead a bit, World 2 has buildings that are made out of milk cartons, for example. Here, we can see cans in the background that function as kind of a break room of sorts. At least that's kind of how I always saw it. I guess you can interpret them as something else. Concerning gameplay, a lot of the basics are retained from Triple Deluxe, so this one isn't as much about weaving in old mechanics with new ones, and instead focuses on taking older elements and changing them up with the mechanized aesthetics. You still run, jump, float, and inhale, get the idea, but also some elements from Triple Deluxe, such as moving from the background to the foreground, and vice versa, make a return. The boss encounter at the end of the level really deserves special mention though, because a Kirby game has never done this before, and it's amazing. You see these Waddle Dees running away from a mechanized Wispy Woods who locks onto Kirby and starts chasing him down. The boss doesn't have a health bar, but you can still clearly deal damage to him, so you have to either deal enough damage before he corners you, or escape through this little pipe. It's not the first game to do this, but it adds a lot to the beginning experience. Now, Superstar Ultra is in a really peculiar spot for its first level. Unlike Superstar, you're actually forced to start with Spring Breeze. This means that it's not only a remake of Superstar, it's also an abridged remake of Dreamland 1. What this first level has to do is capture the feel of Dreamland 1 and Superstar, while differentiating itself enough from both of them so that it feels unique. Also, it has to actually functionally work as a first level. It checks off all of the above with flying colors. As mentioned in the Superstar video, the entire appeal of Spring Breeze is to take Dreamland 1 and change the experience by making it shorter and adding abilities. It's a perfect introduction, and while I still love Dreamland 1, shredding everything in your path with the many abilities Spring Breeze offers you, even ignoring Mix, which gets you any ability, it's just too much fun. But what separates it from OG Superstar are a few things. The most notable right off the bat is that the backgrounds are now fully done with sprites instead of the CG backgrounds from last time. I love the CG in Superstar, but the sprite work here, it's tremendous. Backgrounds feel alive and part of the same world as the characters, environments, items, everything. On top of that, seeing as how the SNES CG was rather limited, some of the environments from that game simply couldn't pop out. Darker colors, mushier looking environments, stuff like that. Ultra, it just doesn't have this problem, and with everything being as vibrant and appealing as it is, it immediately gives this game a major step up from something that was already excellent in Superstar. When going from Superstar to Ultra, I always noticed the difference in control first. Kirby controls fine in Superstar, but he always felt like he had a bit of a wind-up to his initial run, which makes sense, but it doesn't feel as satisfying as just starting a run immediately. Kirby's jump in Superstar also always felt off to me. For a game with action like this, it just felt a bit too slow with too little horizontal momentum to it, but Ultra fixes both of these. Kirby jumps right, he runs right, and he feels the best he ever has. Spring Breeze is actually the perfect intro for Superstar Ultra, because one of the best things about the game is how Kirby feels. And what better way to learn how Kirby feels than going through a short version of an original game that ultimately wanted to do the same thing, but add a ton of stuff absent from that one and just make it an absolute joyride. I've replayed Spring Breeze so many times just to perfect my movement and the like, that I actually used to be able to clear it blindfolded. I definitely want to do that for the channel one of these days. And, unlike Superstar, he can actually drop his ability at any given moment. He doesn't have to make a helper, then ditch the helper, and then make sure the enemy he inhales isn't around, the remains of an old friend. Just drop the ability, get a new one. Simple, traditional, perfect. And, you know, you don't have to look at a disembodied corpse. That helps. Superstar Ultra also does a really nifty trick that makes you feel really excited after you clear Spring Breeze. In the original, you had access to Spring Breeze, Dynablade, Great Cave, and Gourmet Race to start out with. Here, you only have Spring Breeze, as stated earlier. When you clear Spring Breeze, the other modes become unlocked right off the bat. You're given the choice of what you want to do now that you've gotten a good understanding of how the controls and how Kirby feels. I love this approach a lot more than just kind of dumping all these game modes on you at once, simply because of the joy of unlocking all these new crazy modes at the same time and just going nuts from there. Which one do you want to play next? Up to you. So while I feel like it's easy to compare the first levels of Planet Robobot and Return to Dreamland, not so much with Ultra in the mix. Here is what I find one of Superstar Ultra's biggest strengths. You look at the other two games and yeah, there's a lot to praise here with the first levels, but it's all very video game standard. An opening level is supposed to do blank things to set the pace for the adventure. Spring Breeze gives you the basic layout of what Kirby is before giving you all of the new modes that will add something to change what Spring Breeze did. Superstar Ultra may be a bunch of small games in one collection, but they all still play and feel like Superstar Ultra. So all you really need to do to learn the game is play Spring Breeze. That is why it's such an incredible intro. But what this leads into is why Superstar Ultra is so incredible and unique. The game having a bunch of smaller adventures instead of one large one makes it stand out so much, and the ideas present in each different mode that make them stand out add to the replayability of this game. I love exploring in Great Cave because the world is connected together so well, and I love to speedrun, so of course I want to see how fast I can clear Revenge of Mennonite. If I want to play Spring Breeze, but I want a bit more of a challenge, well, I have Revenge of the King for that. The Superstar didn't have Revenge of the King, by the way, and in my book, it's actually the best mode in the entire game. The games all being available on one cartridge is what gives them consistency with each other. Imagine all of these having their own games and how they'd all have to take time explaining mechanics and having their own intro stages, or, you know, just being standard games. I love this idea of these adventures all being together as one full game for this exact reason. They all still stand out, and they each have their own unique and cool ideas. They're all Superstar Ultra. How most normal games handle this is simply by having a main story mode and some side content. Speaking of normal games, Return to Dreamland is definitely the most standard in its structure. It has the story mode, the extra mode, some mini-games, and both the arena and the true arena. Planet Robobot plays with this a little bit. Not nearly to Ultra's extent, but I like the direction it went. And while it can certainly be noted that Triple Deluxe did the same things, I just think Planet Robobot did it better. On the outset, Planet Robobot is actually similar to Return to Dreamland. You got the main mode, the extra mode, some mini-games, and both of the arenas. However, the extra mode is a speedrun-focused mode, Meta Nightmare Returns, where you blow through an abridged version of the main game with a faster character who's essentially wing plus sword, plus some of his own tricks. This mode is a fan favorite, and for really good reason. Triple Deluxe's Day-to-Day Tour doesn't hold a candle, simply on the merit that Hammer is not that fun for speedrunning levels. Wing plus sword plus special attacks, though? Sign me the heck up! The minigames in Planet Robobot are also, well, more than just minigames. Kirby 3D Rumble and Team Kirby Clash, while short, offer some shakeups from the standard gameplay. I've gone over the extensions of both of these games multiple times in Kirby Clash's case, But the base forms are a lot of fun and certainly provide a more consistent experience than Triple Deluxe's set. I think all of them deserve another go at expansions, not just Kirby Clash, but that one's a free-to-play, so it's probably the only one we're getting. Sad. Anyway, to cheer myself back up, I like what Planet Robobot does, especially with Meta Nightmare Returns. Looking at Return to Dreamland, there's no speedrunning with a different character equivalent, and the extra mode is the same as the normal one, just with less health and more difficult enemies, especially the bosses. Yeah, they really harken back to Dreamland 1 with this one. But this is just what the menus tell you. What Return to Dreamland also has, and is a major difference between the normal and extra modes, are the copyability challenge stages. These right here, best thing in any Kirby game. No questions asked. We're done. Video's over. Best thing ever. Like and subscribe. Bye! It's such a brilliant idea to give you a copy ability and challenge you to use it as cleverly and optimally and creatively as you can, and love the challenges that these things bring on. They're not only engaging, they're challenging, especially if you're going for gold or platinum, but they also require that you look at your surroundings for any hidden coins or enemies or switches. Doing all of this while you keep the pace moving, because don't forget, you're being timed, not only adds to the skill required to clear these, and look, they're easy enough to bronze or silver, even gold in some cases, but getting platinum on the normal mode, it can get pretty tricky, and it's really fun. Whew, getting platinum medals in that extra mode, though. What a rush! Stronger design, trickier enemy placements, and better hidden secrets all add up to some of the most fun I've ever had playing a Kirby game. I especially love the item challenge, just because it's such a unique idea in another unique idea. We're going deep. And it's even a new mechanic being integrated into something made for the old ones. It's yet another perfect blend of old and new. That is something that I think Return to Dreamland is so amazing at. It was a long wait between Return to Dreamland and, well, there are a few starting points, but we'll be generous and go with Kirby 64. A lot happened in between that game and 2011. Still, the team went all out and mixed together an old game mechanics that made Kirby great and weaved them in with plenty of cool new ideas that gave the game a very unique edge. And this isn't even limited to just the gameplay either, because things like the background design and even the story all take ideas that were planted in the earlier games and give them a modern edge that makes it feel completely different. Kirby's always had strong backgrounds, but the level of detail in these have always made me want to explore through them. The calm beaches of Onion Ocean, the bright blue sky and green grass and Cookie Country, the absolutely gorgeous clouds blending in with a soft orange sunset of Nutty Noon. If the backgrounds in Kirby's Adventure looked like sprite work paintings, these should just be straight up paintings. Or at the very least, desktop backgrounds. They are beautiful. As for the story, spoilers for Return to Dreamland, although the game is almost 10 years old, so shouldn't be an issue. Magolor is often compared to Marx, and for very good reason. They both pretend to be Kirby's friend, only to betray him when his use has ran out. Kirby beats them, they explode, game finished. What makes Magolor so much better, though, is that he's present throughout the whole game. You can go to the Star Cutter at any time, play some challenge stages, have fun with the minigame, grab a copy ability you want, and just chill and chat with Magolor for a bit. He always congratulates and thanks you when you repair his ship. He tells you about his home world, what he thinks of Popstar, and he just helps you out. He even calls you a cool dude. Look, he likes me. He thinks I'm a cool dude. Oh, and then he betrays you. To be fair, I won't say that I was shocked even when I first played. I was definitely upset though. Should've known. Called me cool. That being said, if we're going to talk about backgrounds and story, we absolutely have to talk Planet Robobot. I talked about the backgrounds a bit earlier, but it can't be said enough just how brilliant every level in this game is for how imaginative the set pieces are. Heck, every world has its own theming. the standard grassland, the bustling town, then a harbor, then a construction site, then a bright, flashy musical town, and finally a world modeled after computers. First off, none of these, except for the grassland, sound like Kirby themes. Man, heck, in the grassland, you ride in a train. Give me another Kirby game that puts you in a train, and the gameplay for the level is designed around that. You can't. As for the story bits, and considering that Planet Robobot is just over 3 years old, this is an actual, legit spoiler warning. The mechanization of Dreamland happening in real time around you, as Kirby runs through what would otherwise be familiar set pieces, hits you pretty hard. Especially when you see Kirby enemies and mid-bosses that are becoming robotic, it gives you a sense of urgency at all times to hurry up and save the day. But then there's the actual story, with Susie trying to stop Kirby, and President Haltman taking the life from Popstar to power Stardream. There's a very tragic backstory with Susie and Haltman that adds, of all things, a lot of depth and even maturity to this Kirby plot. Susie herself is Haltman's daughter, who disappeared as a child during a bad accident involving Stardream. Haltman's desperation to see his daughter again is what led to him draining resources from other life to power Stardream, and doing this slowly caused him to go insane and lose his memories. Susie eventually returned as an adult when so much damage was done to Haltman's mind that he didn't recognize her. Mostly? Enough of him recognized her to appoint her as his secretary, but that was it. In the end, Haltman's very existence is erased by Stardream, and when Stardream is defeated, you can faintly hear Haltman screaming too. Sad, tragic stuff. So, would it be weird of me to say that I still like Revenge of Meta Knight and Revenge of the King stories more than both of these? Obviously, there isn't as much tragedy as Planet Robobot's story had, and I certainly appreciate the old and new story bits from Return to Dreamland, but look, for my game-focused games, I like my stories simple and satisfying. And trust me, nothing is more satisfying than destroying the halberd and seeing Meta Knight's crew just freaking lose it. Look at how mad Captain Volt gets when you use paint on Heavy Lobster. It's so funny. Well, I said there was nothing more satisfying, but I lied. I think Revenge of the Meta Knight has the better overall plot. It's there from start to finish, and Meta Knight is actually properly built up as an intimidating villain. The final act of Revenge of the King has my favorite story bits in the whole series. First, and this is actually the most important in the grand scheme of things, we're introduced to Bandana D here. He's one of my favorite characters in the series, and I am definitely not alone on that front. And going through this story, it's really obvious why he initially caught on. He's super endearing, he works brilliantly off of one of the most entertaining characters in the franchise, Day-to-Day, and most of all, he's just a trooper. He's the last obstacle you face before getting to Day-to-Day, not because he thinks he can win, but because he wants to protect his king. How can you not love him? But even better is the fight with Day-to-Day. Now, keep in mind, this was during the 2000s, before Return to Dreamland came out. This was the era where a lot of people knew Kirby kind of for the games, more so, however, from Smash Bros. And Right Back At Ya. Day-to-Day in Smash was a little more than a newcomer with an infinite chain grab and brawl at this point, so the major Day-to-Day vibes that we got throughout most of the 2000s was him being a bumbling idiot who isn't a threat and can safely be ignored. I won't say anything about the show itself, but the fact that it led into the games for basically every single game in the 2000s except for Superstar Ultra, okay, fine, I guess Canvas Curse 2, is something I still don't think I'm quite over. I hate a lot about how Day-to-Day was treated during this time, but this moment right here, where he tells Bandana D that he's spared in this hilarious but also awfully sad parody of Revenge of Meta Knight. Seriously, how can you not love Bandana D? And when confronted by Kirby, offers him a weapon. He jumps into the ring surrounded by an electric fence with a brand new hammer and a kingly mask, ready to fight Kirby in a one-on-one fight with what has got to be the best range of Day-to-Day's theme ever in what is quite possibly the best boss battle in the game. This is a moment of true bliss for any Day-to-Day fan, arguably still his most defining moment as a character, and while he ultimately loses, the ending is at least bittersweet, with his army of Waddle Dees following him into the sunset. They're still loyal. Aw. It's all amazing stuff, but believe me when I say a completely different kind of feeling hit just as hard when HRD3 showed up in the extra mode of Return to Dreamland. Again, I think Return to Dreamland and Kirby GCN are very different kinds of games, but seeing this boss in the Kirby GCN trailer for 6 years and then getting a proper boss fight against it as a bonus in the extra mode is an incredible feeling you could only get for being a Kirby fan for this long. Return to Dreamland sprinkles a lot of stuff like that into the adventure, but it very rarely ever feels like forced nostalgia. It's typically in the form of obscure Easter eggs that veteran players will get a big kick out of, the optional stuff that doesn't impact the main adventure. And if it is something that relies a bit more heavily on nostalgia, it's either something that's easy to appreciate, like a variation of the Kirby dance sounding straight out of Kirby Superstar, or is something integrated really well into the game that only a veteran can really tell it's nostalgia, such as HRD3. On top of HRD3, Return to Dreamland's boss fights are incredible. This game not only introduced the idea of every boss powering up halfway through, changing up patterns and upping the difficulty a bit, but it also introduced revenge forms for all bosses too. These are stronger, faster, have some differences to old attacks, and in some cases even new attacks. Superstar Ultra is technically what introduced revenge forms as a concept. Wispy's Revenge and Return to Dreamland having purple leaves as a nod to Ultra. I like that. But Return to Dreamland did it for every boss, not just the Spring Breeze ones, plus 2 or 3 extras. And of course, they're just fun to fight. Their patterns in this game aren't as obnoxious as they'd become in the very next game, Triple Deluxe, spending a long time in the background of a stage or relying on long, boring periods of invincibility, where, in either case, you're just doing nothing. Bosses are either always moving, always attacking, or readying an attack, so you're always on the move to either dodge their attacks or beat them before they can get the big one out. Even at the highest level of optimal play, just dealing enough damage isn't always enough. I really love that. For Planet Robobot, alright, standalone, or even compared to most other Kirby games, I think the bosses in this game are great. There isn't too much waiting in most of them, other than the first 2 for some reason. They're tricky, fun to fight, the works, all that great stuff. It's just, compared to these 2 specifically, I think the bosses fall a bit short. There's not as much polish and fast pacing to the battles like there was in Return to Dreamland, while variety is what Ultra has, what with it having all of these different game modes and all. Ultra's variety, as already stated, is among its strongest points, but Planet Robobot and Return to Dreamland both have a major gameplay element to separate themselves from other games. I briefly mentioned super abilities earlier, but I didn't touch on the Robobot Armor yet. Starting with the second level, Kirby can find a mini-mech in a bunch of different levels. With this, he can still copy enemy abilities, and using this can help him solve a variety of different puzzles. When people praise Planet Robobot, they praise it for the Robobot Armor first and foremost. And yeah, it deserves all the praise that it gets. It's brilliantly designed, which is good, because the game is designed around it. Unlike Hypernova, this isn't just a button you press to watch an animation. This is an all-out gameplay-altering style that fits Kirby and is a blast to play around with. To sweeten the deal, unlike Hypernova and even the super abilities, it isn't just randomly placed at the end of certain levels to be used until the level's over. It can be placed at the end, yeah, but it can be used at the very beginning. It can even be placed somewhere in the middle. You might not even have to take it for the whole level. It might be in a secret bonus room that you have to find. You never know. Some give you the option to keep it, some let you get rid of it, some make you get rid of it. It's super unpredictable how it's gonna work. The only predictable part of it is that it's gonna be good. And that, I think, is a really important part of why Planet Robobot is such a massive success. You know the game will be fun because Well, Kirby's fun, but you might also have the Robobot Armor to look forward to. You know you'll be in for a visual treat because every level has a different part of Dreamland being electrified. Hey, I'm trying to keep good word variants here for the better script, okay? And speaking of, you know there's urgency because of what you're seeing and that you have to save your entire planet from being ruined. Every element of a video game comes together to just make you want to play these levels. Yes, the music too. I'll be getting to that later. The Robobot Armor is integrated really cleverly into the levels for puzzle solving too. Sometimes you'll be using the wind formed from Parasol's spinning blades to clear out toxic waste. Other times you'll be carrying a cannon from one part of the level to another. And other times you'll be timing your punches to die in a casino to get star bits or an extra life, while other times you can just demolish a mini-boss with it. It functions as an integral part of the game. And yet, what do I prefer to the Robobot Armor? Okay, hear me out. First of all, I appreciate the super abilities were put into the first level of the game. Again, a big part of what makes Return to Dreamland so good is that it's a mixture of old mechanics and new ideas. So the super abilities being the big one caps off the level really nicely. Secondly, they serve a purpose. Of course, to clear out enemies on the screen, but also to get Kirby to go through the other dimension auto-scrollers. I'm not saying the Robobot Armor or even Hypernova don't have a purpose, but the super abilities themselves absolutely do. I just hear every so often that they're pointless. No, they're not. Lastly, though, I just really appreciate the brevity of them. I really like it when a game pumps me up, gets me hyped. When you use a super ability, it's always this huge deal. The first time you use the Ultra Sword, Kirby swings it around a bunch of times. Oh, look at that sword swing! Oh, jeez! I love Snowball, I love the Ultra Sword, my favorite is Flare Beam. And look, don't get me wrong, I adore solving puzzles with the Robobot Armor and all, but if I had to pick between that and the feeling of satisfaction and empowerment of seeing everything around Kirby just die, I'd pick the super abilities. They are just so exciting. And sure, all of the games have their moments of hype, but none of them even come close to comparing to this. But, okay, cool. Hype is cool. But the levels themselves, how do they all stack against each other? Superstar Ultra goes for a many games in one approach, Return to Dreamland mixes the old with the new, and Planet Robobot integrates the Robobot Armor as an integral part of the experience. Which of these do I like the best? Honestly, looking at them that way, I don't have a clear favorite. Simply for the variety, I want to lean towards Superstar Ultra, but based solely on the Robobot Armor, I can't say that with certainty. And heck, Return to Dreamland has an advantage in how you can always keep adding more players to make the experience crazier and potentially more fun. I enjoy playing single player the most personally, and the experience of seeing which ideas the devs are going to throw at me next puts Return to Dreamland in the same boat as the other two. I think instead of comparing the levels, it's better to compare the content. And in this regard, I definitely show some preferences towards Ultra. Seriously, the multiple game modes in one being a thing, I really don't get that how people don't like that. It's one of Ultra's best aspects. I've mentioned it a bunch, and I'll probably keep mentioning it a bunch more. That said, it is a pretty close call. Return to Dreamland and Planet Robobot are certainly much beefier games, plus Robobot has the armor to work with, while Return to Dreamland has great stuff like the items, the super abilities, and especially those challenge stages. The one aspect I've kind of neglected to talk about is the music for these games. I'm not sure why it never came up. I couldn't really think of a fitting way to sneak the music into any of these other discussions, but these three all have stellar soundtracks. I do have to call out Ultra here for having the weakest one though, which shouldn't be a surprise considering what I said in my Superstar video, but music in Kirby games is very important to me. The fact that I can immediately identify Ultra as having the weakest soundtracks of the three, not a good look. Of course, I adore Ultra's soundtrack. Don't take the above sentences as an actual negative for the game. I mean, it does have some better tracks than the original Superstar. I mentioned Versus Marks in that very video, and I stand by that. And it also has some new tracks, too. Mask Day to Day, a remix of Dynablade's theme from Air Ride, which is a remake of Castle Lololo. And who could forget Galactonite's theme? All great stuff. But the heavy hitters here really are Planet Robobot and Return to Dreamland. These are my two favorite soundtracks in the entire series, and picking a single favorite was really hard. I find myself preferring the composition and instrumentation of Return to Dreamland, but the fact that most of Planet Robobot's music is techno, dubstep, and the like, something that not only Kirby has never tackled before, but also it fits the theme of Dreamland becoming roboticized so well, it just fits the atmosphere, and it's not something that Return to Dreamland soundtrack does as well. I could see Return to Dreamland soundtrack being in another game, but no, not Planet Robobots. I had to dig deep to come up with an answer, and eventually what I came to was, well, the first video for Kirby Month, actually. Feels like forever ago I released that one. Anyway, in it, I said one thing that really stood out to me, especially after this month of Kirby. This is entirely based on personal preference. I can gush all day about how Planet Robobot's music fits the game in a genius manner. Personally, I am especially a big fan of the 100% clear music, being the intro levels track with traditional Kirby instruments to replace the techno. Great touch to signify that the invaders are gone, but I just always find myself jamming out to Return's tracks the most. There's so much variety in Return to Dreamland 2. I feel like anyone can find a bunch of tracks in this game that they really, really like. Okay, let's see. Anything else? Galactonite's in all three of these games. That's a bit of a funny coincidence, huh? No, just ranked them already. Fine. Oh, but it's so hard. Fine. Enough build up. My favorite Kirby game is... You know what? I can keep you waiting on the number one spot for a bit longer. Let's get Planet Robobot being my least favorite of these three out of the way first. Look, I absolutely adore almost everything in Planet Robobot, but the energy and passion that I had picking apart the other two for this video, it just wasn't there with Planet Robobot. And trust me, I've dissected Planet Robobot before. I know the ins and outs of the absolute masterpiece I've been saying this game throughout Kirby Month is. But another thing that I've been saying throughout Kirby Month that especially rings true here is the standard this franchise sets is insanely high. Planet Robobot is one of those games that sets it as high as it does, to give credit where credit is due. And, I mean, give it some credit. The game isn't even 3.5 years old yet, and it's so good that it managed to win my heart over other games that helped define who I am today. Think about it. Kirby's Adventure, Kirby Superstar, Dreamland 3, Canvas Curse, Mass Attack, Dream Course, Amazing Mirror. Those are the other games in the top 10, and I had played all of them before playing Planet Robobot even got announced. And yet, here we are, it's my number 3. And that's great, I love Planet Robobot. The real fight is between Return to Dreamland and Superstar Ultra. And... you know, coming into this, I was fully expecting Ultra to be my number 1 easy, To this day, it's my go-to example of how Kirby should feel. There's no other character I'd rather control in a game than Kirby in Ultra. And because all of these game modes have such different feels, I get to experience this specific Kirby in so many different styles of Kirby. That's amazing. It even has emotional value, something that I'm not really taking into consideration for these. But really, in Ultra's case, it just helped me through such a hard time of my life. It helped me there more than anything or anyone else did. It matters. But, I mean, with that logic, Kirby Month, the YouTube channel, all of you watching this video, none of this would be happening if it weren't for Return to Dreamland. That first video I uploaded over a year ago of me playing Return to Dreamland, not moving Kirby, that had to be my first video. I needed my first to be something so crazy, so ridiculous, so weird, that it could set a benchmark for all of my other videos. And I could only do the challenge the way that I did it with Return to Dreamland. But also, I mean, you know, that's nice and all, but the game is a masterpiece, ignoring that. We were so overdue for a more action-packed Kirby game at that point, and it did not disappoint. Back then, it was just amazing that it existed and was a thing we could play. But now, I can look back and appreciate it for having amazing pacing, really fun co-op, new concepts melded with the old standards, great presentation, my favorite soundtrack in the entire series, and it all just comes together to make such a wonderful experience. But this video's gone on long enough, much longer than I was expecting it to. I'm sure that this all has to end. I'm sure this is a decision that once I make, I'm never gonna go back on. And I'm sure that, despite everything I just said, there are people watching that know this was actually a really easy decision. Look, Return to Dreamland is a game that gets better and better every time I play it. I will say that, and comparing it to Superstar Ultra and Planet Robobot, I've actually grown to like it even more. And playing it for footage, it's like I never put my controller down since the last time I played it. It's all so familiar. Even though I'm sure that while I'm looking over the footage for editing, I'll be screaming, "Why are you so bad at this?" It's just the way it goes, right? But the thought of even comparing it to Superstar Ultra is just not happening. Superstar Ultra is everything I want out of a game. I won't waste time going on about all of the things I already said, but to this day, I can't believe that so much of what I look for in entertainment, this game just has and executes correctly and phenomenally on literally all fronts. I don't even care that it's a remake, because not only is it a far superior remake to the original, but also because it improves and changes a lot of what was already good from the original. So I find the original a much different experience that, while inferior, is 100% still worth playing. I have that game at number 4. A remake that's this good in every regard, and yet still works in a way where the original isn't just old history. That's Superstar Ultra. My favorite Kirby game, my favorite video game, my favorite. And with that, my friends, Kirby Month's Kirby rankings have come to a close. I wanted this last video to be one heck of an ending, and well, I hope it was. But until I see you again, I've been Kirby Fan. Thank you so much for watching. Like and subscribe, and that's a wrap.